The chandeliers of the private dining hall shimmered like liquid gold, scattering fractured reflections across crystal glasses and polished marble floors. The restaurant was a sanctuary for the powerful, a place where billion-dollar negotiations unfolded beneath soft music and the scent of imported truffles. Waiters moved like shadows, silent and precise, trained never to intrude on conversations that could alter industries overnight. At the center of the room sat Billionaire CEO Adrian Volkov. He didn't need to announce himself. The tailored charcoal suit, the understated platinum watch, the composed stillness in his posture, they all spoke of authority more convincingly than any introduction could. His dark eyes were steady, thoughtful, as two board members across from him discussed numbers, projections, expansion timelines. But Adrian's attention wasn't entirely on the spreadsheets glowing faintly on a tablet beside his plate. It drifted instead to the young waitress who had just refilled his glass of water. Her name tag read, Mila. She moved differently from the others. Where most staff avoided eye contact with high-profile guests, she observed, quietly, thoroughly. Her gaze never lingered long enough to seem rude, but it absorbed everything, the mirrored walls, the entrances, the distance between tables, the hands of every guest in the room. When she placed the glass down in front of Adrian, her fingers were steady. "Thank you," he said politely. "You're welcome, sir," she replied. Her voice was calm, grounded, not the nervous politeness he was accustomed to hearing from staff around influential clients. Then the doors swung open. Not dramatically, but with enough force to make several heads turn. 4 men entered. They weren't dressed for fine dining. Leather jackets creased from wear. Heavy boots striking the marble floor without hesitation. Their eyes scanned the room too openly, too deliberately. One of them, tall, broad-shouldered, with a faint scar cutting across his eyebrow, locked eyes with Adrian almost immediately. Mila saw it. Her posture didn't change. She didn't freeze. But something in her gaze sharpened, a silent shift from service mode to assessment. The tallest man began walking toward Adrian's table. The other 3 spread slightly behind him, not close enough to draw immediate suspicion from untrained eyes, but positioned well enough to close in quickly. Adrian noticed them too. His expression didn't alter, but his hand moved subtly away from his wine glass. Well, the tall man said, stopping beside the table. His tone was casual, but there was venom underneath it. "If it isn't the famous Adrian Volkov." The board members stiffened. "I believe you have the wrong table," Adrian replied evenly. One of the other men laughed under his breath. "Oh no, we've got exactly the right one." Around them, conversation began to thin. Forks paused mid-air. A violinist near the corner faltered slightly before continuing. The restaurant manager started forward, wearing a strained smile. "Gentlemen, is there a reservation?" One of the men shifted his jacket just enough for the manager to see the grip of a weapon tucked into his waistband. Not fully drawn, just enough. The manager stopped immediately. Mila was already moving. She didn't rush. She picked up a silver serving tray from a nearby station, placed 2 untouched glasses on it for appearance, and walked toward the table as if responding to a standard request. Her heartbeat was steady. 4 targets. 1 visible weapon. Likely more. Distance to exits. 12 steps to the left, 8 to the right. "Excuse me, gentlemen," she said politely, stepping into the small gap between 2 of them. "There's been a mix-up in the kitchen with your order." The tall man frowned. "We didn't order anything. I'm terribly sorry," Mila continued smoothly. "If you'll just follow me." One of the men grabbed her wrist. "Hard. Stay out of this." The room seemed to inhale all at once. Mila's eyes flicked to his grip. Thumb placement, pressure angle. She dropped the tray. But it wasn't an accident. With a sharp upward motion, she drove the edge of the metal tray directly into his face. The impact made a sickening crack. Blood burst from his nose as he stumbled backward, cursing. Before the second man could react, Mila twisted her trapped wrist in a precise rotation, breaking his grip effortlessly. She pivoted, her elbow snapping into his throat with surgical accuracy. He gagged, collapsing against a nearby table and dragging a tablecloth down with him in a cascade of plates. Screams erupted. Chairs scraped violently across marble. The third man lunged toward Adrian, hand diving inside his jacket. Adrian rose abruptly, knocking his chair backward. Mila moved faster. She planted 1 foot on the fallen chair, using it as leverage, and launched herself forward. Her heel struck the man's wrist mid-draw. The weapon flew across the floor, skidding beneath another table. The 4th attacker charged from behind her, arm raised. Mila dropped low, pivoting on her heel. She seized his wrist mid-swing, stepped inside his balance point, and flipped him over her shoulder in one fluid, controlled motion. He slammed onto the marble with a heavy thud that knocked the air from his lungs. 3 down. The tall leader wiped blood from his face, fury twisting his features. He pulled his weapon fully free now, aiming recklessly. Enough, he roared. Guests scrambled, ducking beneath tables. But Mila didn't retreat. She closed the distance before he could stabilize his aim. Her hand struck his forearm, redirecting the barrel toward the ceiling. A deafening shot rang out, shattering crystal above them. Gasps and debris rained down. She twisted his wrist sharply. The weapon clattered to the ground. A swift strike to his solar plexus followed, precise, controlled. Air exploded from his lungs as he dropped to his knees, wheezing. Silence fell in chaotic fragments. Shattered glass glittered across the floor. A violin lay abandoned near the stage. The attackers groaned in various states of disorientation. Mila stood in the center of it all, breathing evenly. Not wild, not shaking, measured. Adrian stared at her. The timid-looking waitress was gone. In her place stood someone trained. Someone disciplined. Someone who had assessed, decided, and executed in seconds. Distant sirens began to grow louder. Security finally rushed in, followed by armed officers who quickly secured the 4 men. As one officer cuffed the tall attacker, he glanced up at Mila and did a double take. A slow grin spread across his face. Still got it, Sergeant. A murmur rippled through what remained of the stunned crowd. Sergeant. Mila's expression softened just slightly. Old habits, she said. Adrian stepped closer, glass crunching beneath his shoes. You're military, he said quietly. Former, she replied. He studied her face, calm, composed, almost apologetic. I apologize for the disturbance to your dinner, sir. For a moment, he simply looked at her. Then a faint, incredulous smile touched his lips. I believe, Adrian said slowly, you just saved my life. And for the first time since the doors had swung open, Mila allowed herself a single steady breath, not of fear, but of release, knowing the danger had passed. For now. The next morning, the city woke to headlines that screamed across digital and print media alike. Billionaire CEO survives armed restaurant attack. Waitress foils 4 assailants. Heroic act saves life of prominent business leader. The photos were grainy, taken from the restaurant's security cameras, a blur of movement, a tray flying, men collapsing in various poses of defeat. But none of it captured what had truly happened, the timing, the precision, the instincts that had made the difference between life and death. The world saw a dramatic scene. Adrian saw something far more remarkable. The young woman who had saved him, the seemingly ordinary waitress who had moved with the certainty of a trained soldier. By mid-morning, Adrian had requested a private meeting. Mila arrived at his skyscraper office, the glass tower cutting a sharp line into the skyline. Even in this environment, the aura of wealth and power couldn't overshadow the sense of purpose she carried with her. Gone was the apron, the uniform of a restaurant server. Today, she wore a simple, fitted blazer, her hair still tied back, though with a sense of controlled professionalism rather than casual necessity. Every step she took was deliberate, measured, and Adrian noticed it immediately as she entered the office. He didn't rise from his desk but gestured toward the window behind him. The sunlight poured in, bathing the room in warmth that contrasted the cool, steel and glass interior. Sergeant Mila Hassan, he said, his voice steady but deliberate. She paused, a faint shadow of surprise passing over her features. Former sergeant, she corrected him softly. Adrian turned slowly, eyes fixed on her with an intensity that could unnerve someone unaccustomed to it. Special Forces, he said simply. No question, no accusation, merely a statement of fact. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her posture alone confirmed it. She had been exactly that. Why are you working as a waitress? He asked after a beat, curious rather than judgmental. There was no room for condescension in his tone, only genuine interest. She met his gaze, calm and unwavering. My father needed surgery. Insurance wouldn't cover all of it. Military discharge benefits take time. I needed immediate income. Adrian nodded slowly, absorbing the explanation. And the attack last night? It wasn't random, was it? No, she said quietly. A hostile acquisition. You shut down a criminal investment chain last month. They lost millions. They won't stop. I know, Adrian admitted. His dark eyes flicked toward the view outside, the streets below thrumming with life, unaware of the violence that had almost breached this sanctuary the night before. You stayed calm, even before they made a move. You noticed them immediately. I always notice, she replied. Her voice carried an edge of quiet authority. Situational awareness is drilled into you. You're trained to see threats before they see you. And last night, Adrian said, his tone dropping slightly, almost reflective, you acted instinctively. You saved my life before anyone else could even react. She allowed herself a faint exhale, a gesture so subtle it could be missed. It was instinct, training, and necessity. He studied her for a long moment. You left the military, but you didn't leave the skills behind. No, she said, a hint of something vulnerable slipping through. I left because I was tired. Tired of being underestimated. Tired of being surrounded by men who only valued me when they needed me. Adrian nodded slowly. I see that. He paused, walking toward his desk. I want to offer you a position. Her eyes flicked toward him, curiosity piqued. Sir, I want you as head of my personal security division, he said. You'll answer directly to me. Full authority. Build your own team. You'll operate without interference. And you'll be compensated for your expertise. Mila's eyes widened slightly, her lips pressing into a thin line. Why would you trust someone you barely know? With that, I don't need to trust you blindly, Adrian said calmly. I've already seen your judgment, your decisiveness, your skill. You moved faster than anyone could comprehend, and no one but you ensured my safety. That is trust earned in action. She let silence linger, considering the offer. Her mind flicked to her father, still recovering from surgery, medical bills mounting faster than her paycheck could manage. And then to herself, the feeling of purpose, of agency, that had been absent since leaving the military. She could continue living in quiet struggle, invisible and underpaid. Or she could step into a position that respected her training, her instincts, and her strength. You'd cover my father's medical expenses? She asked cautiously. Adrian nodded. Already done. Consider it gratitude, not charity. Her gaze sharpened, scanning his face for arrogance, for ego, for any hint that this was some condescending gesture. There was none, only sincerity. A faint tension left her shoulders. You don't even know me, she said softly, the statement more rhetorical than questioning. I know enough, he replied simply, his dark eyes steady on hers. Enough to know that I need someone with your abilities. And enough to know that someone with your abilities doesn't follow orders blindly, they act when necessary, with judgment. You demonstrated both last night. Mila looked out toward the city, the skyline stretching endlessly, the hum of life far below. She thought of the restaurant, the chaos, the precision required to protect not just herself but someone of enormous importance. She thought of her instincts, honed over years of disciplined service, now tested in the unpredictability of civilian life. She thought of the satisfaction she hadn't realized she'd been missing, the responsibility, the purpose, the sense of being needed for more than menial tasks. I'll need full operational control, she said finally. Her voice was calm, but the weight of her words carried authority. You'll have it, Adrian confirmed. And I don't wear heels on duty, she added, a faint smirk tugging at her lips. Noted, he said, a rare trace of amusement flickering across his features. She extended her hand. The gesture was formal, professional, yet underscored by the subtle acknowledgement that this was more than a job. It was a partnership forged in circumstance, skill, and mutual respect. I accept, she said firmly. He shook her hand, firm, equal, unflinching. Good, he said simply. Welcome aboard. As she turned to leave, she felt the weight of the city's skyline behind her, the responsibility she had embraced settling comfortably on her shoulders. Adrian watched her walk away, noting the subtle shift in posture, the ease with which she moved through space. She was no longer a waitress. She was a strategist, a protector, a force to be reckoned with. Somewhere below, the restaurant staff were still repairing shattered glass, murmuring about the young woman who had moved like lightning, who had taken down 4 armed men without hesitation. They would never look at her the same way again. She had been ordinary to them only because they had never looked closely enough. And Adrian, watching the sunrise over the city, understood something deeper. He wasn't just protected now. He was no longer alone in facing the threats that inevitably came with wealth and power. In Mila, he had found something rare, competence, courage, and loyalty beyond measure. And sometimes, he thought with a quiet, almost private smile, the strongest person in the room isn't the one who sits at the table with a golden chair. Sometimes, it's the one you least expect, moving among the tables, unnoticed until the moment she becomes indispensable.